possible? I get to the very end. And tell these in the embassy to just give me simple sentences. I mean, I've said this before. And tell that bloody interpreter. This language. He just complicates it so much, you know? Tell him to cancel this meeting at 6 o'clock, will you? I don't have the patience to do it.
Hello and welcome to Australian Agenda. I'm Peter van Onselen. Those scenes there were Kevin Rudd when he was Prime Minister in a video that was never really supposed to go to air, posted on YouTube just the other day. The question is, was it posted by Kevin Rudd detractors supporting the Prime Minister to try to undermine his potential bid for the leadership once more? Or was it, if you're more Machiavellian than that, posted by Kevin Rudd supporters to bring on a showdown for the leadership? Who knows? But one thing it is certain to do is exactly that, bring on a showdown. To discuss this issue, we're devoting much of Australian Agenda to this story. We'll be speaking with three of the leading political editors in the country. The Daily Telegraph's Simon Benson, who joins me now. Thank you, Simon. And out of Canberra, we'll be joined by Sky News' political editor David Speers and the political editor of the Australian newspaper Dennis Shanahan. First up, we'll be replaying the interview that David Speers did last night, extraordinarily just before midnight, with Kevin Rudd, where he defends himself and also sends out a bit more speculation perhaps by talking about what he has learnt from his mistakes in the past. Later in the program, we'll have Andrew Wilkie out of Tasmania, a crucial independent to whether or not Kevin Rudd is going to be able to be supported by some of these independents if he were to come back as Prime Minister. And later still in the program, New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell. We'll talk to him about some of the state issues going on, not the least of which is political donation reforms, but we'll also obviously be seeking his reaction to just what he thinks of the debacle going on in Canberra. First up, let me bring Sky News' political editor in, David Speers, out of Canberra. David, thanks for joining us. You did this interview last night with Kevin Rudd. Extraordinary that he was prepared to do it. What did you make of the entire thing?
Well, the video that you've just played surfaced late last night on YouTube, and Kevin Rudd clearly didn't want to leave it unanswered before flying out early this morning to Mexico. He's also going to Washington, London this week, so he'll be out of the country for this week. He didn't want this suggestion that that he still has this temper, this anger, this volatility and foul mouth to scare off caucus colleagues. What he's done in doing this interview last night, and he hasn't done an interview about the leadership or about himself really for quite some time, is answered this criticism, pointed the finger of blame for leaking this video very directly at either the Prime Minister's office or Prime Minister's department. But then, and perhaps most significantly, he's laid out for the first time a job application for returning to the top job, saying he is a changed man. He's going to listen more, consult more, delegate more, not pack so much into each day. This was very much a message to his caucus colleagues that if they return to him, they won't be getting the Kevin Rudd of old. He's learnt his lessons. Now, the impact of both the leaking of that video of Kevin Rudd and the interview that he's given in response does ratchet up this leadership, this undeclared leadership war, several notches. This morning, a Labor source in the Gillard camp has told me that whoever leaked this video was a moron, that this is bound to bleed more votes away from Julia Gillard. In the Rudd camp, there is an expectation now that there will be a leadership showdown next week when Parliament returns, that if Julia Gillard doesn't bring on a spill herself, and she's under some pressure to do that, then Kevin Rudd will challenge.
Thanks very much for that, David. We're going to take a look at this video in a moment, but it's interesting to note, the use of social media. Steve Gibbons, Labor MP, has used Twitter to describe someone as needing to be a psychopath to think that they could come back. You can only assume that he was referring to Kevin Rudd. Let's take a look now, though, at Kevin Rudd's reaction to the pretty extraordinary posting on YouTube, his interview with David Speers.
Kevin Rudd, welcome to the program. Can I start by asking you to tell us where and when this video was recorded?
I think it's in the reception room next to the PMO. But as to when, I'm not exactly sure, David. I've only just seen this thing myself. A couple of years back, I assume. I think from time to time I was doing speeches in Chinese for various Chinese community occasions, and you'd sit down and try and get the script right. Obviously, I wasn't getting it right on this occasion. I was getting pretty frustrated about it.
But the point here is, was the videotape then in the hands of the Prime Minister's office?
Look, I'm unclear on all that. Normally these things go from the Prime Minister's office and I presume for some sort of archival storage into the Prime Minister's department or some other government agency. I'm not exactly sure. Normally,
if it's been leaked, then it presumably may have been leaked from the Prime Minister's office or the Prime Minister's department.
What I was just about to say before is these sort of edited off-takes we always assume are just destroyed at the time. Obviously, these either seem to have found their way into some archival storage somewhere in the PMO or into a government department. But the bottom line is here, I accept responsibility for what occurred. I'm not about to point the finger at others.
But surely you have a suspicion as to why this has now become public. It's been done so for a reason.
Well, look, anyone who's got a touch of suspicion about them would say that if this was done, somewhat embarrassingly, a couple of years ago, and it suddenly emerges now, then obviously it's a little bit on the unusual side. But these are questions for others. I'm simply concerned about addressing my responsibility for the use of language which occurred privately, but is now out there publicly for all to see. And of course, I've expressed regret about that.
Let me ask you about that. Your behaviour on this video. There's bad language. There's blaming of others for what's going wrong there in the filming of it. Obviously, is this a different side of Kevin Rudd to the one we see publicly?
Oh, David, there's just one of me, warts and all, and I'm not perfect. I've never claimed to be, and I think if you would know from my previous statements on these sorts of things that I've never pretended not to swear from time to time. That's been out there for a long, long time. I wish I sweared less, but that's just the truth of it. And I think we all get frustrated. I get frustrated. I got frustrated then. There was a whole bunch of things I had to do, a very tight timetable, lots on the agenda. And when things go wrong, you get frustrated. But it was frustration at me, frankly. Any references to other folks is essentially frustration directed at me and my inability to get through the script at the time in the right way. And as I said, the fact that the language is out there now in the public domain is embarrassing, but that's my responsibility.
But if I'm reading this right, you're not apologising for who you are here. This is Kevin Rudd. In private, you do swear, you do have a temper at times.
Well, the bottom line is, David, I think most of us, if we're being honest, don't use the best language from time to time, and I'm no different. I never pretended to be any different. But I think on your broader question is that, sure, you look back on these things with a couple of years of hindsight and you try and learn from them, and if you ideally you wouldn't be getting as head up about things even when you're under extreme pressure. You'd be making sure that your day was sort of better regulated, that you weren't trying to do much, that you delegated more, those sorts of things. I think you learn from experience, and I certainly did from then, when the pressures on the office of Prime Minister are huge, to be quite honest.
So you're saying, Kevin Rudd, that you are a changed man from when you were in the Prime Minister's office. You are now of the view that you'd be able to delegate more, you'd be able to do less rather than more, and be a different Prime Minister?
First of all, David, nice try on the question. I'm very happy being the Foreign Minister of Australia, but I could pick that one up on the way through. But the other point is this: I wish I could say that I've fully reformed, changed individual with no errors. That's just unbelievable, and it's untrue. If you were to ask me if I still swear, yes, I do. Do I swear less? Yeah, I hope so. Although I think My mother tried vainly to teach me the trick of counting slowly to 10, and I probably get to 5 these days, but I need to get it up to 10. But you learn from your mistakes, and I've made mistakes in the past. As to whether, K. Rudd has changed in any fundamental way, that's a judgment for others to make. But I've certainly reflected a lot on the last several years, and you'd be a mug if you didn't learn something from the past.
Well, the criticism from some of your cabinet colleagues was that you didn't listen, much less consult enough, that you were, to put it bluntly, a bit of a control freak. Are you saying that is no longer the case in your role as Foreign Minister at the very least?
Oh, I've reflected a lot on that, and some of the criticisms made of me were fair cop, and a lot of them were exaggerated and sort of produced after the event. You know how history sometimes gets a little bit rewritten, but I don't walk away from some of my own, failings in the past. But the bottom line is, I think you do learn, and what I've tried to learn from all of that is do less in a given working day rather than trying to do everything. I think that's an important principle for everybody. I think it's also important to delegate more and be sort of happy and contented about that. And on top of that, most importantly, consult more broadly as well. You speak to my colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs or in my own office and elsewhere, other foreign ministerial colleagues, they'll give you a judgment as to whether things have changed or not. I'm just telling you what I've reflected on, and I hope I'm a bit better for it, but I don't think I could claim to be Mother Teresa at this stage, mate.
You did say earlier that you're happy being Foreign Minister. We've heard you say that in response to all of these leadership questions for months and months now. Kevin Rudd, let me ask you directly, do you want your old job back?
Let me answer that directly, David, and say I really enjoy being Foreign Minister, and I hope to be able to continue being Foreign Minister because I really value the work. It's very satisfying. I get to do things which are real in the world and make a change and make a difference. I couldn't ask for anything more.
I mean, that's fair enough, but with respect, that doesn't answer the question. And the party is crippled with this leadership crisis at the moment. Surely you could say one way or the other, you're going to challenge or you're not going to challenge.
Well, can I just say right now, David, there's no challenge, to use your term, on. We have a Prime Minister. I'm the Foreign Minister. I'm trying to get on with the job of doing Australia's foreign policy. Part of the reason for speaking to your program now is that I'm off to a meeting of the G20 of foreign ministers, including meetings with Hillary Clinton and others, then to Washington, then to London for meetings on piracy in the Indian Ocean, which is affecting navigation and shipping, and then to Tunisia for a meeting of the International Contact Group on Syria to try and bring a resolution to this appalling carnage there. I find this work really important. I do it to the best of my ability, despite all the frailties that we've been just talking about in this program, which are many.
Well, just finally then, how do you reflect on what's going on in the party? The leaking of this video, the various revelations that we saw coming out of the Four Corners report, how do you characterise what's going on?
Well, David, I've got a pretty simple view of these things. It's, when you stuff up yourself and you do something which isn't entirely appropriate, you just accept responsibility for it. You get on with your job. You do it to the best of your ability. In terms of everyone else in our government, I think our ministers are doing terrific work out there. And we, as I said before, have a Prime Minister who is leading us. As for our overall challenge, you know what I think Australians want more than ever, and that is for government and opposition, Mr Abbott as well, to focus on the absolute detail of how we sustain the strength of this economy into the future. That's what motivates me. That's what motivated me during the global financial crisis, trying to keep the economy out of recession, which we did, trying to prevent mass unemployment, which we did, trying to ensure that we continue to keep this country strong despite the financial crisis in Europe. That's what motivates me and the government. I think we're doing okay on that score, and I think it's important that we look on that main game rather than be distracted by all the bits and pieces of day-to-day popular politics.
Foreign Minister Kevin Rudd, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having the program, David.
That was Kevin Rudd speaking exclusively to Sky News' political editor David Speers last night, just before midnight, before he flies out today to head off to the US, Mexico and elsewhere in his duties as Foreign Minister. And the extraordinary thing there, Simon Benson, is that he was interested in having this discussion, clearing his name or at least explaining what happened before he left.
It's interesting. I think the dynamic has now shifted dramatically. The challenge is inevitable and imminent. And as I wrote in the Daily Telegraph last week, I think that could come as soon as next week when Parliament resumes. There's no doubt that was a job application. It was designed for one particular purpose, and that was to leave his caucus in no doubt about his intentions before he jets off for a week.
Let me ask you, though, I mean, the interesting thing about this is that it's untenable, you would think now, for him to stay where he is. He has to either put up or shut up. That's certainly what Julia Gillard's supporters are telling me. But at the same time as that, if he does neither, and if he continues to do what he did in the back half of that interview and say he's happy being Foreign Minister, we're in a situation where the Prime Minister really, to show some authority, needs to sack him. But if she tries to sack him too early, she probably inadvertently sacks herself. It's a delicate one.
It is a very delicate one, and for her, you always, for a leader to call a spill, the challenge there is to not demonstrate that you're in a position of weakness, and that's what it immediately does. And even if he only had 30 votes in the caucus of 103, it demonstrates that a third of the caucus do not support her. So it's a demonstrative display of the lack of support in her caucus. So I doubt that she will bring it on. They'll be trying to work out ways of how they head this off. But I think now there's no doubt, and I don't think that the Prime Minister should be in any doubt, that Kevin Rudd will challenge. And it will be interesting to see how it comes down, because I suspect that he's probably pretty close to having the numbers.
All right, Simon, stay with us. We're joined now out of Canberra by the Australian's political editor, Dennis Shanahan, for his view on events. Dennis, it's all about Kevin Rudd. Just in a general sense, what is your take on what we've witnessed?
Well, I think that Kevin Rudd has said there is no challenge on. That's palpably untrue. We are now in a situation where there is a challenge. The Prime Minister last week realised how determined Kevin Rudd was on this. She sent out lieutenants to try and address what he was doing. They tried to head it off. And in fact, what's happened now with this moronic leak of the video clip has actually put the pressure back onto the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is now standing accused again of involvement in some sort of dirty tricks. Kevin Rudd will pursue this. He has demonstrated that he has a grip on this. He is confident of winning, and in the interview he has sliced every piece of Julia Gillard's credibility. There is a challenge on, and I think the pressure is now on the Prime Minister to try and head off as best she can the challenge, which may come next week or in the Ides of March.
Dennis, you've alluded to this already, but if I could get you to expand on it, the medium to long-term implications of this, both for Julia Gillard if she survives, or indeed for Kevin Rudd if he becomes Prime Minister again as a result of this video coming to light, the YouTube video, I mean.
Look, this campaign has become so personally bitter that it's not about policy, it's not even about poor polling, although the structural weakness of Labor for months and months at record low levels of polling has had the ALP caucus in a sense of despair. That has now turned to panic, and there is now a sense of self-destruction. We have ministers going out and attacking the Prime Minister. We have the Foreign Minister. We have ministers trying to argue that Kevin Rudd is a changed man, and he's doing this in his own words. There is no doubt that whatever happens, this challenge will destroy Julia Gillard, no matter what the numbers are. And even if Kevin Rudd is restored, the questions then become, can Labor government survive intact and go the full length of an election until August next year?
All right, Dennis Shanahan, political editor at the Australian newspaper, once again, thanks very much for that analysis.
Thanks, Peter.
It's interesting, this, because the big headline today was supposed to be Darren Cheeseman, the Labor MP out of Victoria, a close working factional ally of Kim Carr out of Victoria, who we know is doing the numbers for Kevin Rudd, coming out in the papers and saying that he doesn't think that Julia Gillard can win the next election. She will be annihilated, and basically suggesting that a Kevin Rudd comeback is what's necessary. That would have been big news in and of itself before we had this leaked footage by someone or another, a moron as Dennis Shanahan put it, of Kevin Rudd on YouTube. Plus, of course, Kevin Rudd giving that exclusive interview to David Speers of Sky News, our political editor there. When we come back after the break, we will be joined out of Tasmania by Andrew Wilkie. No one more important than Andrew Wilkie. He's one of the independents that, if there is any chance of a leadership transition to Kevin Rudd, they need the likes of Andrew Wilkie to still be supporting the government. Back in a moment.